Hello. I don't know if you guys can hear me. If someone wants to let me know in chat. Hi. So little technical difficulty. I'm a bit new to this. I'm one of the newer coaches who joined the team. If anyone can hear me, you can let me know in chat. Hello. Okay, cool. So my name is Kevin. I am a new coach for MLH. I've been in the hacker community since 2019 is why I got started with hackathons and stuff. So what is that? So the pandemic's been through 3 years, 19, 20, yeah, 3 years. So yeah. So today I really wanted to, we're going to look at GitHub and GitHub Tools because I think that's a really unique thing to learn and get started with. But a little about me, just a few things I always like to start with is that you should never feel like you need to know everything, which means in this case scenarios, I can be wrong. You can be on. We're all here to learn. So feel free to always correct me, drop something in a chat if you think there's a better way to do something, and we can always go over whatever is like your train of thought or how you do something, because there's never one way to do something. As many of you know, if you have coded priorly, there's always multiple solutions for something. Anything I gave might not be the optimum solution, so feel free to chime in, etc. And what's really important, I feel like, about the technical space is it's okay to not know something. It's okay to Google because it's one of your best tools. I think what is important for you to learn from any of my streams, I like to do a lot of introduction streams or really how to break people into the hacker space, is that we're going to have a mix of people who've done this before, who are super into it, who are super talented, and not that anyone isn't, but there will be skill disparity. Don't ever feel discouraged because they all started somewhere. So I want to always start with that. And with that being said, if you have experience, please always feel free to help someone else. If someone in Discord need anything, feel free to chime in, help them, etc. If there's any question, offer your advice. Someone helped you, got to where you were, always feel free to help someone else get there. I think that's a really important thing, especially for an introduction to anything. And then that being said, I will be mostly trying to teach you how to learn and not necessarily how these concepts are. The headphones are Corsair ones. So I got them actually on discount. It's great. It's great. I can't hear anything with you guys. It's kind of weird. I'm just really getting used to this talking to myself thing. So this is in case I play music. I'm really into playing music in the background as we do things because it's a really chillax environment. So yeah, let me see if I can get this music going. And I personally preference piano because they're not too hard on the ear. If it's louder than me, please do let me know, and then we can get that sorted. But let's get going. So today we're going to talk about GitHub. So that's where we're going to start. If you want, you can always feel free to play some of your own music. If that's the case, let me know. I personally prefer a bit lower music, and as you can see, this is my desktop background. I like to keep things pretty cool. So yeah. But I can see I don't know if hard time music is a request of something, but yeah. Okay. Let me see if I can get things fixed. I'm gonna start that again. Do share screen. Cool. This. That's a lovely question. I wish I can tell you some of the stuff. Only key issue. I'm a bit new to this, so if any other coach in the chat knows, please feel free to give me a heads up. But let's see. Ooh, why is my share screen not working? Chat. Okay, cool. Can you guys hear it now? Okay, so here is, to be honest, I am on Windows just because that's what most of our hackers, especially people who are new, will probably get into. If you are more experienced, you might have heard of Windows Subsystem Linux, which would be great. Great. You can follow along with that as well. But I will be using Linux. I will be showing you multiple ways, but I will be using Windows with PowerShell because it mimics a lot of check-ins. Yes. Let's see. for check-ins, I will drop the check-in. So make sure you check in here. I just dropped it into the chat. So make sure you do check in with that. But yeah, so I mean, this is from the background manager. If you ever like more animated background, I think it's pretty cool. So yeah, but to get started, I really wanted to see is how many people here are experienced with Git. If you are, sure you should let anyone know. But make sure you check in. I dropped the check-in thing on the bottom. Let me see. Okay. This is a Windows machine. I use Windows Substitute Linux for all my Linux usage. I do have a Linux Raspberry Pi that you go to if I need to. But for a majority of people, especially who's starting, I think a Windows machine is probably going to be what they have. So we're going to start here. Okay. So let me get everything pulled up. So before we get started, GitHub, we need to start is what really made GitHub, right? So also feel free to stop me ask questions. I probably answering a bit. There is Rainmeter as well. I use a mix of Rainmeter as well as Wallpaper Engine. Yeah, exactly. That's what I do. So it's a bit of everything. I do have a few designs and stuff, but share the video check-in link. Yes, I will share it again. Feel free to stop by the Discord. If you're not in the Discord, I will in the announcement channel. There's also the check-in for the specific session. But yeah, let's get going with some more of the basic stuff. So I need to figure out why I place things. So if you haven't, GitHub is built around the concept called Git. So Git, there's no prerequisite. Whoa. Any prerequisite. I can't speak English. It's okay. Not today. But there's nothing. We'll really be getting into everything ourselves, and I'll go over what you need to download if you need anything. There is other softwares we'll get into, but again, GitHub is built around file management control with system management control called Git. There's a few version of it in the past. Git is what kind of like broke the ground and stood up against everything else. Especially GitHub really helps. But yeah, so for Git, as you can see, here is a download for Git. I will drop it into the chat for anyone who needs it. This is if you ever want to use Git locally. So that is, it's disrupting. Oh, am I clapping? Okay, my bad. I will stop doing that. Being a bit new to this makes it a bit hard. I will keep that in mind. So I need to figure out how bad this thing is. I'll stop clacking my hands, but that's okay. You see, we all learn something new. Not used to this. I do usually teach a bit, but I usually teach in person in front of a lab and less on my computer. So, and if I do teach on Discord, and they have pretty good sound thing. So thanks for letting me know. If there's anything, feel free to let me know. But like I was saying, so this is the downside for Git. There's always great references on any technology. You can always identify a lot of great references, especially in their documentation. So like if you go to the Git website, always feel free to they go over how branches really work. They go over a lot of the information, and then they always have documentation for specifically things you can use in Git. So I like to usually go to the reference manual. So these are all the basic commands. They give you example how to use it, etc. So let's get going. So this is my own GitHub. But before we can get to GitHub is let's see how some Git works, right? So I like to use Windows Terminal. So this is a new application developed by Microsoft that makes your terminal experience a lot easier and a lot better. So as you can see, I have multiple tabs. If you're ever interested, you can always look this up. I like to share the tools I use because it does help with the process. If my keyboard, so also let me know. I do have a mechanical keyboard, into keyboards a bit, so it's okay. But yeah, so you can see I have a lot of different type of terminals or things available. So I'm going to use PowerShell for this session just because it's a lot more accessible to a lot more people. If you have any Windows Substitute Linux on your control, you can always use any of these. I have my Git bash, so it's the bash that comes with Git is what also we'll be using. So for example, I'm going to first I won't get too much into Unix commands or stuff, but I'm gonna first make a directory called global. Actually, I'm using global hack week init. I might not be allowed the. Yeah, I'm not allowed this. Okay, that's okay. I'm gonna cd into global hack week init. Okay. Oop. And then we'll get started. So ls. I'm a bit more used to using a Linux machine. So if I okay, great question. So how to do that, it's pretty actually easy. So to do the new tablet option, it's actually a new thing developed by Microsoft. It's great. I really do enjoy it. But it's called Windows Terminal. So I put winter. Oops, Windows Terminal. So you can either get it from the Microsoft Store if it's available for you. It's called Windows Terminal. You can also get it from their GitHub website. Okay, so the difference between PowerShell and command prompt is kind of the predating the PowerShell. So command prompt first came out, and then we had PowerShell. And the reason PowerShell came out was a lot more people were used to Unix or Linux commands. So PowerShell kind of mixes both of them. So, okay, I'm getting used to like throwing these on the screen. But yeah, so the difference between command prompt, Git bash is the bash that was written directly for Git. You don't have to really worry about that. So the key thing here is command prompt and PowerShell. Command prompt is the pre-thing before PowerShell. PowerShell was then developed to be a more powerful command prompt that has built-in SSH, that has other things built into it, such like SSH, your other like FTP server, SSTP server, and stuff like that. But yeah, always feel free to ask questions. That's what we're here for. But yes, so basically, if you ever need help with any command, you always do the command name -h. It'll always give you things. If you want in-depth help, generally you do the same thing, command line -help. Well, it's two helps. So if you ever, so here is just a good thing to know. If you ever are looking for typing the whole word, you always use 2 dashes. If you're always typing one letter, use 1 dash. That's how the Unix system developed doing things. A terminal. So a terminal is basically a non-graphical interface for you to interact with a system. So there is multiple different versions of terminal. So yes, PowerShell is a more powerful than command prompt, and it is what replaced command prompt in newer versions of Windows. So if you go check your Windows, if I go up to my top and right click, you don't see command prompt anymore. You see Windows PowerShell because that is more powerful. Yes, for sure. So for the dashing thing is whenever you're working with any sort of command line and you ever need help. So for example, Git, if I do H, it usually gives anything that is a letter, right? So -H, anything -J, -K, etc. Anything that's one letter, you use a dash. That tells the Unix command that it's a more abbreviated version. If you ever are using a whole word, for example, instead of -H, it gives me a smaller prompt of these commands. If I want a more in-depth, I use --, which allows me to type in word. So I use --help. It gives me more of a breakdown, a more longer thing for you to read. Yes, you can. I do a lot more things on my GitHub that are privated, but you definitely can get my GitHub URL. I do have a few things that are public from things, but I use, there's a few versions. So GitHub is just one of the entities that is using Git. It's one of the popular ones, especially because it is now owned by Microsoft. So they manage it, etc. So it is the more popular one, but there's other things like GitLab, which you might use if you ever get to the point where you're developing for a company. A lot of them like use GitLab, and there's why it's really important to learn more the technology than the specific platform. But for us in specific, because we're hackers and we want to develop project and make things public, GitHub is great, and they are also one of our sponsors. I don't work for GitHub, but I do love it, so it's okay. I will stop clapping. Good. Okay. It's okay. Sorry. Bit nervous, but it's okay. But yeah, so a few things so GitHub Tools will really be getting started today is just learning how to create a repository, how to look over a few things on, overview. So we're going to look at here. I will do something so it's a bit easier for everyone. My computer wants to cooperate with me. Let's see. So I'm a big fan of Notepad when when I need to note things right. So I will blow this up a lot. So first thing we're going to go over is really Git in its entirety of what it is, how it works. Then what we're going to do is go over setting up a Git local project. So in case you ever want to develop locally with version control, you're able to do this. Have a good night, everyone who's going to bed. I see some people are going to bed. It's okay. Then we're going to go over GitHub, which is a great online version of the version control. It's an online repository where you can actually put your version control and host it there, version control system. Then we will probably go over GitHub desktop, just because that it becomes a lot easier for people to utilize when they don't understand. So let's actually get started. So I have Git installed already. If you haven't Git installed, if you're joining us late, you can go to the Git website and download Git. I will drop that in the chat one more time. And then for references, if you ever need any help with any Git commands, you're allowed to go to the documentation. They do quick references. They'll tell you how to use every command. But we're going to learn some of our basic commands here today. So I am going to first clear my terminal. Oops, clear. So now we are in where we start. So Git, there's a few commands that is really important. One is Git init. So like init, how we get started with our hackathon season. Git init is what allows you to create your Git repository, right? Okay, so difference between GitLab and GitHub is they're just different technology or online version repositories that uses the technology Git. So let's make sure we make that distinction. Git is the technology that GitHub and GitLab uses. That both of the GitLab and GitHub utilizes Git, the version control system, to create online repository site. So GitHub is more used for personal project. It's ran by Microsoft. It is a sponsor for MLH. It's great for hackers because it's open, so anyone can access it. It's also easy to use, and also because GitHub also has a hacker starter pack, that's the one we're more likely to use. But GitLab you might see in more of a production environment. So where I've used GitLab is if you ever do anything with on a project for a company or anything, there's a higher chance to use GitLab because they can build in other things. But for us, we'll really be focusing on GitHub and the tools they provide for us. But yeah, so as I was saying, okay, so again, so the difference between Git and GitHub is online repository. Let's just call it, it's almost like a database, right? So it utilizes the technology Git, and it's like GitHub is like almost a server hosting all these repositories for people, and the Git is the technology that is communicated that actually does the version control, right? So I will actually show you an example, right? So this repository, if you can see, I like to use JetBrains, so this is my PyCharm, but this repository is hosted on GitLab. GitHub. So this repository is hosted on GitHub, but locally, what actually does all the actual committing, all the actual commands you run, or actually does the setup for things is the technology called Git. But yeah, so like other people mentioned, GitLab really only supports Git's version control, but other might do something different. Yes, so version control system essentially is another for tracking changes. I will see if I can find one that I can show you. I can't show some codes on my computer just because they're for projects. But yeah, so as you can see is that this branch tree thing, actually I can show that. So this branch tree is like my different branches in Git. So we'll go over the concepts in Git as we go along. But so what Git init does is, I'm a big fan of Paint when I explain things. I don't know about anyone else. Paint is great. But yeah, let me see. Let me throw that over here. Welcome to painting. But yeah, so let's go over a few concepts. So version system control is what Git is. Git is one of a type of version system control. There's other ones out there. I'm most familiar with Git. Git kind of won on the version control that becomes the most mainstream. So that is what VCS and what Git is. Then you have the service, which is GitHub. It's an online platform that allows you, that will host your repositories repos, and allow you to utilize the version system control to grab your projects, right? So what happens here is Git init. I can't spell, by the way, so that might be a problem as we go along. But Git init, what it allows you to do is it allows you to generate your first project. So we think of Git or version system control in the form of trees, generally. So, for example, when I first do a Git init, essentially what happened is I am generating my first branch of the tree. So branch, so you have something called a head pointer that kind of points to where you are right now. And this is like a branch of the tree. And what it allows you to do is have multiple branches. And what we use branches for is what we do something called features, right? So this allows multiple people to work together on different parts of things. You can always learn more on the Git. Remote branches is somewhat confusing. That won't be covered. So we won't be covering full remote branches. What we'll be really covering is how you can get your code to GitHub. So for example, so going over is that, so your head points to a branch, and branches allow you to basically do a system control. So every time I do a commit, I generate a new kind of node or new copy of what my code looks like, and allows you to generate multiple. And that way you can always go back and look at previous code. So for an example, I will bring back up this tree. So I will make this bigger. So you can see this is an example of a project that I was working on, where like you can see that these are each are a branch, and as you increment, it allows you to store like code, so you can go back and see what has changed and stuff. So these are just a few examples of that. But let's actually get started. So what we will need to do is, if everyone wants to follow along, is to create your first project. If you have PowerShell, that's fine. These commands work the same thing on Unix or Linux systems. You do git init, and then whatever you want to call. I like to do --bear to make sure that nothing else is created with it, right? So it's a bear project. So git init --bear, and then you name it. So I'm going to call it demo, right? So once you run this command, now I generated a Git repository inside Git. Git is essentially a technology that keeps track of your changes, right? So if I do ls, all you see is demo. If you do ls-a, okay, so this is not a Linux machine, so you can't do that, but I can, let me see, ls-h. Let's see if there is any help for this command on here. So there's no help for it. So ls is the command to list directory. I think for this one it's dir -h. There's no help for that. --help. Okay, so here's what I do. When things can't help me, I just boot up one of my Linux machines. So one of my Windows substitute Linux, so you can see what's going on. But essentially, you can see that demo is now created. If I do cd demo, now demo is now a repository. Okay, ls is not a command here, right? So ls, you can see that it has hooks, info, object references, descriptions, head. ls-h doesn't help because I'm on PowerShell. If my Linux server, Windows substitute Linux server boot, I'll show you. But so this is what allows Git to keep track of your version changes, is these foes right here. So now we have made a repository. What is important to show you next is how it's easier to manage with something called, let's see. So if we do, I think it's GitHub Desktop. So GitHub Desktop is essentially GitHub's friendly way to manage a repository, right? So I just made that repository so I can add existing repository on my hard drive. To get this, you would just go to the Git website. Let me see. So the GitHub website will be here, and there is, you can always just look it up. So I'm going to look it up for you guys. So it's called GitHub Desktop. This is what I like to recommend to starters if you're not used to command line of how to utilize GitHub. It makes it really easy. So GitHub Desktop, you can download this, and this will give you a more graphical way to do it, right? So I can now choose my path to where my my repository was. So I generated under my user folder. So I will just go to my user folder. Oh, is it dash? Let me try. So we always learn something new. I'm not used to using commands on PowerShell, but let's see. Does that doesn't bring anything? I just don't think there is a help thing built in for dir or ls for PowerShell. But dir lists your directory, so we're good from there anyways. But yes, let me grab my thing. C dash. So as you can see, it tells you where you use it. So I have it in user. So I don't know if this works here. PWD does. So PWD brings you the current path. So I'm going to use this to find where my path is. So this is where I initialize this. So I'm going to select this folder and open it up as my repository. Bear are not going to, okay, so they don't support bear. It's okay. So we will do td ... This brings us to one directory out. Yes, that is a problem. So that's fine. We can just do a git, and then we can do init, and we just don't deal with bear. I usually start mine with bear, especially if I'm going to clone something over, but we just won't do with bear. So git init. So I'm going to call it demo2. And then now, if I go here and do demo2, there shouldn't be a problem. Let's see. So go out by one, demo2. There's the git, select folder, add repo. So now you can see this is what Git will do for you. So we have something called the master branch. That is the branch that allows you to work with, that is basically your base branch, right? So that's your master branch is essentially the branch that everything is based off of. It's usually the branch you want to keep consistent. For us, we're always just going to work in the master branch. Normally, if you're using Git, you wouldn't work in the master branch. You would create separate branches, make your changes to features, and then use the master branch. But yeah, so this is an example of how you can do your local management of things. Because once you have this created, right, you can then, if I want to create a file, which I don't know if cat works. I don't think it does. It might actually. Let's see. Control. Let's see. So let's see. Close. So if I go to where that was located. So if you're really developing without IDE, which I don't recommend, but you could be, all you got to do now is go to wherever you have started your demo. So demo2, and let's say I want to now paste in, for example, a text document, right? So I can change this to wherever there's bear allowed to make changes into the repo. So I just been taught to use bear when I do a thing and merge it in, but that's a great question. Let's see. So we can always, again, is teaching you guys how to learn is referencing here, right? So Git, you can click on here. So this will give you what you can do with Git, right? So what we just did was called Git init. We can check what the init thing does. And then you can see --bear. They always tell you what they do. So it creates a bear repository if the Git directory is not set. This is the current working directory. So this allows you to create something bear from the local thing to work with. Why now default branch is named as main against master? So it's just, I think it's naming change is really it's just an issue of understand like what makes more sense, right? So for some people in the past, naming a master can get confusing. So I've seen it both ways. I forgot which one's lower, but essentially your master and main branch is the branch that is your finalized product, right? So like you would always, if you do multiple development, which we won't do, but if you do multiple development, you create, let's say, a branch, and let's say I'm building a feature for that branch. So if I bring back up Paint, let's see, what did I put Paint? So a better way to explaining this is you have, let's say, here's your master branch, right? So this is your master or main. This is where your other branches, if you do make one. So let's say I'm building, let's say, app, right? And I want to add a button. So I build a branch called add button. I can create my button here, and then I can merge it back to master. And what this essentially does is keeps everything in master consistent and allows multiple people to work on it. So let's say if I'm working on a branch to add a button, and you're working on a branch to add, let's say, a text box, you can create your new thing and then move it back in. Okay, there we go. So someone mentioned it. So apparently there is a bad connotation to the word master. It has a reference to So yeah, so they changed it back to main. But essentially, you got to know is master and main is where you want to, where we're going to be working directly. But if you ever work more with Git more in depth in the future, you would create separate branches to do different things and always merge it back in. But yeah, so let's continue. So what I was showing was if you have GitHub, you can see this is what you can see. I added a document because I was middle adding it. But yeah, so let's say I want to add a document called test.txt. You can see now it shows that locally I've created something called test.txt, right? And commit to master, what a commit does is essentially is it takes your current changes and applies it to master. We're only going to be working on master, right? So this, it says all I did was I create. So this gives you my changes that I've done. That's currently not in master, right? So what I've done is I just created a test branch or test.txt. And then now, let's say for a description, I will call it added test file. Make sure you leave good description in case you ever have to go back. You can always figure out where you have been. So if once I commit that to master, you can see I'm going to create directly to master. You can see now if I go to master, got it. Cool. You can see that text has nothing, but text has been created. If I go into test.txt now, though, and let's say make a change in here. Let's see. So if I open this up, and if it ever wants to open up. Okay, cool. So text.txt, if I make a change, let's say hello chat, and I save it, you can see that if I go and check the changes here, now there's one more change and it tells me I added hello chat. And if I check the history, you can see that this change didn't show yet. So I would do added hello chat. Then I would like commit to master, and this will bring it back up to master. Let me actually hide that. But yeah, so this is how you would like use it locally. It's essentially a way to keep track of your changes. Because then if I ever want to know what happened to this, you can see I created this, I updated this, and you can see what changed in between in case you ever need to go back for something. But this is really for local, and which is what we'll be focusing a bit less on. So what you can do is, let's say on your Git hub, if you haven't made an account, how do you add a new file in GitHub Desktop? For GitHub Desktop, what makes it easier is for people who don't use this IDE. To add a new file, you legit just navigate directly to wherever the file directory is. And to add a new file, I just got to drag and drop it in. And then once it's drag and drop into the location, you would bring back up your command prompt. So for example, I will bring up my command prompt. So we're going to go over really just a lot of introductions into Git. So what I'm really going over right now is how to do Git development locally. And what a tool that is really useful for beginner if you don't use IDE is called Git Desktop. But yes, give me 1 second. So Git Desktop, GitHub Desktop, it's GitHub's way for you to locally manage that in the demo too. Oh, that's fine. So you don't see it because I have my view option set so I can see hidden files. Not everyone has that set. So if you go here, right, I have mine called hidden files checked off. So it's a hidden file is why you see it's not like fully there. It looks like a ghost thing. To check in, you can go to the Discord chat and then it should be listed there. So, but as I was saying, this is how you would do locally. So to add something here, all you got to do is, let's say I'm going to bring up a new text document. So I'm going to make it outside of this folder, right? So let's drag this out of the way. On my desktop, I'm going to create a new folder now, called new. I'm going to call it add folder. Add folder. I don't know why I called it add folder. Hello, where did it go? Let's see, new text. Okay. Add file, right? So I have this document now, add file. Oh, there's 2 of them now. That's great. But that's okay. And they got moved. This is the problem when you have multiple screens. You don't know where anything lands. Let me see. Hold on. Whoop. We will minimize this. Let's see, where did those go? They're not on this screen either. Are they on this screen? No, that's so weird. Am I hovering over them or something? Okay, it doesn't matter. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna open my desktop, open a new window. So my desktop now has a new file I've created. I'm just gonna look up add file. It's right here. So if I want to add a file, I can just drag it, drop it right in, and then the file will be added. And then you can check your change history. You can see that now GitHub desktop is telling you, hey, there's a new file here, and you can add it. And then you would just provide it a description, right? So a task is now updated from GitHub account. Do you want to sign in? Nope. So I'm not going to sign in right now. But then you would just add, let's say, add a new file, and then you can just commit to master. And then now your master will show the change of adding that new file as well. So all you got to do is open open where you have that Git repository set on your local machine, and then just drag and drop your file over. But now to get into that is really just how you do it locally. But now to get into managing things on a more what you can really use for your project is using GitHub. So everyone gets GitHub Pro for free in the student pack. So you can always make sure you sign up for that. But what you would do now is, let's say we'll create a new GitHub repo. So what I'm going to start is calling the repo's name. So MLH Global Hack Week init Git demo, right? So this is going to be made from me called MLH Global Init Demo. You would name it whatever your project is. This is optional. I'm going to make mine public. I like to add a README file. A README file is essentially what tells you, when you do documentation, what tells you more about your project. So I'm going to add that in. I'm not going to do any ignore. Normally for Git ignore template, essentially for changing certain parts of the program, right? So like if you're coding in, let's say Python, there's certain files that you would just git ignore so you don't bring them over. But we're not going to be doing things specific. So I'm just going to do git ignore none, no license none, and then I'm going to create that repository. So once the repository is finished creating, you get to land on a page like this, and this is essentially your bare bone of your repository. And you can see GitHub has added things like open and web IDs and stuff, so it helps make things easier. But what we can do is go to this HTTPS, or even open in GitHub, right? So you see this option. So I can just go down, and if you have GitHub installed, you can create a repository and just open it directly on GitHub. So from URL, local path, documentation, click clone. You can see I am cloning. What cloning is, it clones a repository that's remote directly onto your local machine. So how Git, again, works is Git is technology that utilizes, that is utilized for version control. So you have a local and you have a remote. The remote is what you would host on a server, but if you use local development only, you wouldn't have a remote. So our remote right now is hosted by GitHub on some server they own, and our local is what just is stored on a local computer, right? So what I'm doing right now is I'm cloning the remote repository directly to my local machine. So then it will show up here on my local machine once it's done cloning, right? So it's cloning to a different location actually. So I'm going to open a new one, and then I'm going to travel to user documents / GitHub /MLH demo. So you can see it's slowly pulling the Git file there, and now you have this on your local machine where you can now add to your project. You can build your project from here, etc. And then I'll give you an example. So let's say I want to take everything we just done. I'm going to wait for this to finish cloning, but everything we just done here, and we're going to later add it to our Git repository that we cloned down, and we can see it pull over. So why it's taking so long, it might be because let's see. So let's see. It shouldn't usually take this long. I actually don't know necessarily why it's taking so long, but let's see. I wonder why it is taking so long. It shouldn't usually take this long, especially because we have nothing in the Git repo. That is really interesting. Let me see if we can figure this out. So I am going to, let's see. Has anyone's finished? Because mine is taking a while. So if you get, I'm going to reboot up my GitHub desktop to see if it was just a lag or anything. But let me see. So demos. Oh yeah, okay, it's not pulling here. Yours finished. Cool. So let me see what happened, and let me try to re-pull mine back down. So code. I'm gonna go to here. Open in GitHub desktop. Open in GitHub desktop. Folder. Folder contains file. Git can clean to empty folders. I'm gonna clean this file up again, and then hopefully this will finish. So I'm gonna delete. I'm actually just gonna delete this whole folder. So it's okay to make mistake. Git is pretty hard. So if you ever need to start over, you can always delete everything and then just reclone it. Hopefully this time it will not take a decade. There we go. So I don't know what happened there. But now we're done, right? So now you can see I can access now the repository, MLH Git init Git demo, and we have the file here. And what's cool is you can see nothing is currently on your actual Git repository. But what you can do is I'm going to now take the files we created for our other repository. It's okay if you don't know what's going on. If you were joining late, you can look at earlier in recording the session. And again, this is beginning friendly. There's definitely people who have used this a lot more than other people. We're trying to teach really the basics. So what we've gone over is what Git is. It's just the history of Git, how version file control systems work. We're now doing a simple demo of the difference between our local usage of Git versus our remote usage. GitHub is a place that allows you to store remote repositories. So the last step I've showed is if you go to your GitHub, and after you create the repository, you go to click on code. You can open a GitHub desktop. This GitHub desktop is a tool that GitHub created for a lot easier experience with their software, right? So it allows you, it handles all the command line commits, it handles all the command line pulls and pushes, which are command line for what we already showed you how to do on GitHub desktop. So commit would be when I let's say make a change here in the change log and I hit commit to main. There's a command line version for it, but we're trying to keep it simple. Cloning and forking are two different things. So what cloning does, it clones a copy of the repository. What forking does, here, I'll throw this question on the screen. Forking creates another version of that same repository. So let's say I'm working on a project and you want to build upon my project or take my base code, you would fork it. If you are, let's say, working on my exact repository or my exact code, you would clone it. Let's see. There's no difference between HTTPS, SSH, and GitHub's command line interface. It is really just different ways to pull a project down. So I've done SSH. That requires you to have an SSH identity. HTTPS will require you to, let's say, have already logged on to it. So it's just different ways to pull it down. A lot easier to do is to just utilize things like that. And it is true. So if you use any sort of IDE or integrated development environment, they handle a lot of this for you, right? So you wouldn't have to use something like GitHub. But to our people who are starting, this might be easier. An example of the IDE that I handle is I like to use JetBrains IDE. So this is PyCharm, and it handles all my Git stuff for me. You can see my branches. It handles push and pulls, but we can get down along the line later. I personally will recommend learning the command line interface, but because we are at a shorter time, it doesn't hurt to first understand the concept through the GitHub desktop application and then learn how to use the command line interface later. So I dropped the repository. There's a book on it that's free on the Git website. You can learn about all the commands and stuff. A few of the main ones are git commit. So that allows you to commit a change. Same thing that happens, like commit this button. We'll click on this button. It does it for you. Git clone pulls down a repository. Git push pushes something to a repository. Git pull pulls something down from a repository. Those are really the 4 you really need to know to get started if you're doing command line, but we're not. So we're gonna continue to truck along here. So now let's say I want to add, I want to add these 2 files. Give me 1 second. Let me mute some stuff so we don't get that. So I'm going to now add these 2 files that we created earlier to this repository that's on Git. So I'm going to do is copy those over. So after those get copied over, you can see that on changes, now I have 2 of them, right? And well, I need a summary. So added file from local Git. Oh, can't spell local Git repo. So I'm going to upload to GitHub repo. So if you take any file and you add it to here, and now if I hit commit, what it does is it commits it to main locally. But because now we have a remote thing, you can see this option is here. So there's no more local changes. What you would want to do is what I was saying was git push. You can just do with this. So git push to origin is what it will allow you to push directly to the GitHub website. So I'm going to need to log in here. You might need to log in with your GitHub account so you have access to this specific GitHub repo. But let me see any questions in chat. What does commit to main mean? So committing to main, essentially what that does is committing your current changes to the main branch. So again, you have to think about it as 2 separate things, right? So don't worry about the remote. So locally, what you've done is you went to the remote, you pulled down a copy of this project. Doing a commit to main is if you make edits, nothing has actually been edited even on your local version of master until you commit to master or commit to main. Main and master are just the name for a branch. They could be anything. I can name it develop, right? My master branch or my main branch could be called develop. The new system now auto generates them as a branch called main. The old one used to be master, so you might see both of them. Those are what you would usually ID as the branch that really has everything that should be working, and then feature branches are working on later. But yeah, so to do a commit, essentially we'll commit it, so it will add it to what the master or main or develop, whatever your branch's name, to stage it to be ready for deployment onto, let's say, your remote place. So if you can see, so after I create here, nothing has showed up here, and that's because I haven't pushed it to the origin. Origin essentially is the location your local project is going to look at in your remote project to push to, right? So I need to do authentication. I'm going to drag this off screen to do my authentication. If you got GitHub and you didn't make an account, you can go ahead and create it. You should already have an account, actually, if you download it. Pop in your credentials to log in real quick. I'm going to do that real quick. So I'm going to do... So you're going to just log in real quick. So I'm going to do... Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm going to log into my Git repo. Oop. Does anyone have any questions? We'll take questions as I try to log myself in. Which is pretty funny because I seem to be having a hard time logging myself in. Any questions in chat about anything we've gone over so far? Okay, so pushing the origin, well, I will explain that again after I log into. So pushing the origin, what that essentially does is, I think I'm logged in now. So pushing the origin, what allows you to do is look at the current changes. So what commit does is, here, I will paint it so it probably is easier for people to understand. So the few things we have, right, is the few command is first you after you create a repo, you have first thing you want to do is actually do git add. So what this automatically does it for you, but if you're doing a command, git add is essentially what occurs for people who are using the GitHub desktop is when we drag it in here, automatically does git add for you. But what git add does, it stages files to be committed. That's what git add does. Ours, whoever's using GitHub desktop, it automatically does for you. As you drop it in here, it automatically runs git add. So the Git knows these files are now part of its system. Git commit is it actually stages those changes to the files to a branch, right? So it stages the changes to a branch. So like when I do git commit, it will add them to the branch so they actually change on master. Before, if I adds the file here, git commit will, let's say, put these things onto the master, and you generally would leave a comment, right? So like I create a new file, I'll leave, let's say, created new files or added new files as the comment. So when I commit it, I can see this is a change. Committing it, it's basically saying this is the change I made to a branch. Next you have is git push. This is only if you're working with remote branches as well, which we are right now, right? So git push allows you to update the remote branch to look like your local branch, right? So that's what it does, right? So what you said, git push to origin. Origin essentially where the location of your remote branch. So it's the origin, right? So it's like the starting place of everything. Because let's say I have one origin and multiple can pull from it. So git push to origin essentially will push it to where your remote branch is, right? So I'm gonna name it. So here's the GitHub name for it. I'm gonna add a description. Let's see. Actually, there should be already one made there. So let me see what's going on. So pushing the origin. It was loading. So now if I push the origin, you can see if I now go to my GitHub repository that I created earlier, and if I refresh my screen, you can see the main branch now has been added, changed to add the files that we just created, right? So you can see that here's the add file that we created earlier. There's a test.txt that says hello chat, and now everything is on your GitHub account. Did anyone get lost? Have anyone tried that? So if you push it, it will directly show up here. Okay, yeah, so the command here, someone pulled up, is if you were doing this through a command line interface. Actually, if I'm not wrong, I think -u should mean upstream. So what you're saying is git push upstream to origin master, but we can always check. So let's see. So this is why references are great. I am pretty sure. So if we do a git push, so we can look at git command. Where's push? So I'm going to look up push. So -u, you can just look through this sort of thing. It will tell you what it means. Let's see. I'm gonna help -u. Yep, -u stands for upstream. So essentially, you're telling what branch you're doing it to. But yeah, so that is the command for if you were to do it through a command line. You should do git push -u upstream master, origin master. But we don't need to do that because you're using GitHub desktop, which it does it for you. We can also have two remote, like one in GitHub and other is like we use for deploy crew. So two remotes is one is GitHub, other is like, remotes again are just location where you're pushing the code, right? So I can actually technically go here, right? And I can go to repository settings and I can say, here's where the remote stuff is stored in the .git file. So if I do, I think it's git, not config. Let's see, where is it? So on repository, you can push it to a different thing. So remotes are just different locations that store your thing. We're pushing it to GitHub, but if you have a deployment on Heroku, I forgot how you say it. but you can use those as your remotes as well. Heroku is a hosting server. So Heroku is a hosting service for you to host actual processes where things are running, right? So you can tell it to run code or actually execute stuff. Well, GitHub is where you would host your repository to actually do your development. So how generally the development stream what would go is you would develop on, let's say, GitHub, create all your changes on GitHub, and then you will push that to Heroku, and then you would, let's say, run it, right? So if I'm building a web application, I'll develop it, keep change of other repository on, let's say, a GitHub repository, and then once everything is done and I want to deploy it, I would deploy it to Heroku. But yes, I hope that makes a bit more sense. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to show you. So for what you can do for this global hack INIT, as you're working on project, you can start playing around with version control systems, right? So if you are not using, common things people use is, let's say, Notepad++, right? So let's say I want to edit these with Notepad++. I'm going to boot up my Notepad++. Let me just make sure. Okay, cool. So my Notepad++ is a bit more fancier than most. Oops, let's see. Let me make sure I have nothing that I need that can't be seen up. Cool. So my Notepad+ is a bit more fancier because I use it for development sometimes. So you can make your edits here. So the workflow process for this, if you want to use GitHub and GitHub Desktop, is you would then first go to your GitHub thing. I'm working on a new project. Let's say the web development workshop that's coming up next, right? You would just go to here, go to your actual home, we'll go to repository, create a new repo. We call it demo. You can call it MLH web development application or web development workshop. Create one for yourself, clone it to your local, work in your local, add files to here as you are working on your web thing. And then you would then use GitHub to commit your changes, upload it to Origin or push to Origin, and then you can have it here, which anyone can view your work, right? So if you're submitting a project later on where you want to submit something, you can submit your link to your GitHub demo and everything will be there and anyone can look at it. But yeah, is there any questions? So I think I've gone over a lot of the workflow process. I think I really want to do right now is go over any questions people have about this workflow process. If not, this is really meant to break people who are new to using a version control system into the space. So anyone lost, have any question or are experiencing any technical difficulties? If not, this is really just time to take questions. So let's see. Ask any questions in chat and we'll go over them and break them down. Yes, that's correct. If you want to edit those files, you would, let me bring back up my screen. There's so many different ways to do this. Okay, so if you want to edit those files, all you would do is open up in any editor you want, right? So I showed you if you are someone who like to use, let's say, Notepad, I can hello chat, add new content. I will save it locally, and you can see GitHub desktop will automatically pick up, oh, there has been a change where it should. Hold on, let's see what's going on. Did I save it? Let's make sure I saved it. Let's see. Oh, because I opened the wrong add file. So I opened the other one. So I would, let's say, edit this in my Notepad. So this is the right file. So it will, let's say I add this content. So this is the wrong one. I add it here. I save it. You can see that GitHub desktop will automatically pick up, oh, file has changed. And then you would just add a description, right? So added example of how to push or edit file. I will hit commit to main. So now the changes will be committed to your local's main branch. And then once that is done, I will hit push to origin. And then now I just got to open up my repository again. And if you click on this one, you can see the new content we just wrote is there. There is no Git. You're talking about like if you're talking about like GitHub Desktop. GitHub Desktop is essentially so most IDEs has a version of has like version file system controls built into them, right? So GitHub Desktop is one. If you're not using IDE developing locally on things that don't have built-in, you can use GitHub Desktop to manage your repository. But if you're using IDE like VS Code, it already has something built in. You can just use that, and GitHub Desktop really serves you less of a benefit unless you're trying to pull down a project and you haven't utilized the VS version system control system in VS Code. What I do recommend is, let's say if you're not used to the version system file system control in VS Code, you can utilize GitHub Desktop to pull your project to manage your version system control, and then use VS Code to do your editing of your thing. But there is built-in for VS Code if you would like to fully just use that. That's a great question for the web development track that comes up earlier. Feel free to join them and ask them. I'm not too sure what they have planned for you guys for the web development track. Okay, making a new branch is useful in what sense? So the point of having multiple branches, right, is if you are doing iteration or iterative work, right? So let's say here is my branch called main. This is a bit more advanced stuff, but a branch called main. So if let's say I want to work on a new feature, right, for something like in our example, let's say pretend this is code for something. I want to work on a new feature, but I don't know if this will break my code or not. I can open a new branch, work on that branch, and then make sure everything's functional before I merge into the main branch, because the main branch is where you really store your most working code. So a good example to look at this is probably open source code, right? So if I go to, I don't know, I should have probably picked the open source project before this, but let's look at the Windows terminal, because we were looking at that earlier today. So if we go to Windows terminal and go to GitHub, so Microsoft terminal, you can see that they have multiple branches for different development, right? So their main branch is what is currently the most functional thing. And let's say they're adding a find context menu. So here's a code they wrote for this thing, and that will then later be merged into main to be the most functional project. So yes, so as this is the command if you are trying to create a new branch. It's git checkout -b. B stands for branch, and you name feature one is just whatever you want to name the branch, right? So if you want to correct, if you go to branches, right, you can see branches are also stored in directories. If you want to store them in directory, you can do /something branch, etc. But yeah, you can always explore other people's Git repository to see how they organize things and utilize that. What is the wiki on GitHub? Can you explain a bit on that? Is that wiki on GitHub? I don't know if there is a wiki on GitHub. Because GitHub utilizes the technology Git. So here is the documentation for Git, which will help you learn the different commands and how things function. They also go over like how Git actually works, right? So it goes over how like the main branch, how you develop, why would you utilize this iteration type of development and topic. So you can always just go to the Git website and go through the documentation, and there's a lot to learn there. So I will drop actually the documentation, one more time for you guys into chat. Oh, no, on GitHub, on website, let me see. So if you go to GitHub, you're saying no on GitHub. So what is, let's see, how do license work on Git repository? So there's different license options. When you create a repository, you can tell it what type of license you want it to be. You can always create private repository if you really want to just work on it yourself, right? So I will go back to that question, but so if you do a new repository, you can select the private. This means you can access it. And what helps with this is if you utilize this, it allows you to development from multiple places. Oh, okay. So let's see. So, oh, you're talking about this wiki. So this is a wiki, like someone already mentioned, is used to maintain, let's say, information about this project, right? So let's say if this project is growing big and stuff, I'm off mine. But real quick, to go back to the previous question, should probably not draw. How licenses work is you can choose your different licenses. There is your standard different type of development licenses. If you want someone to not be able to see your code, you just set it to private. Going back to our example of the demo, wiki is essentially just documentation. I can write for this, right? So I can be like, welcome to this wiki, create it. So now there is a wiki page in case someone ever want to learn stuff about my project or what my technology is, they can just go here. How to make your README better with fonts and stuff? README is essentially a scripting language. It's valid set up like that. So you can use your basic. So if I want to edit my README, right? So I can use my basic. I think, let me just double check because I've done READMEs prior. Read. Again, we always learn how to write. So I'm pretty sure it takes like HTML, if I'm not wrong, but I'm going to double check that and then we can take a look at that. Oh, okay. So you use something similar to HTML. It doesn't use HTML directly. It uses pound signs, right? So I'm not sure about the CSS. I would look into it, but like if I use like pound signs, it tells you the different levels you want to indent in, and there's other ways to go about it. But hey, maybe next time I'll learn README myself, and then we can do a workshop on README. Oh, okay. So for people who had the question, the answer in chat is README uses Markdown. So you can just go to the Markdown thing to learn about Markdown, and that will work. It does not restrict people from copying code, but if you want your repository to be private, to people not to copy your code, you would just make it private, and you would just give access to the people that need it. Yes, you did get this right. You change, so you add files to wherever your home directory is, right? So for us, it would be here. You add files into here. You then change anything in the file you would like. Then you would commit to main on the desktop GitHub, then commit to origin. That's correct. That is okay. So that is not a fork of the original repo on the GitHub website. That is your own repo. So forking is, let's say I want to look at this Microsoft project, right? I think I can build upon this. I cannot. But if I think I can build upon this, if they have the option turned on, I can fork this project, which I might not be able to because I don't think they is there forking somewhere here. Let's see. Quest add files. So this is not open source. Fork usually exists in open source code. I actually don't know if there's fork. But you would see, let's see. So if we go to our project, right? If you go to code, let's say you go to my thing and you want to build upon it. Where's the fork button?
Battery
you can see
low.
Up here, there's fork. You click on fork. You would fork on it with another owner, and then you would provide a description, and then you would be able to create a copy of my project to build upon on. But yes, then you would do a pull request on GitHub desktop, and then things will show up. And thank you for everyone who is helping in chat answering questions. Again, this is really in the spirit of how everything works. Always ask question. I don't know everything, so anyone who ever knows the answer or thinks I might have got something wrong, feel free to always correct me. Oh, was it on the Microsoft one? I didn't see. Oh yeah, so I can fork the Microsoft one if I wanted to fork terminal and create fork, and now this will generate on my own user. It will generate a repository that's exactly the Microsoft terminal repository that I can edit on, make changes, etc. Any other questions that we can take? Oh, what did you guys hear? I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, sorry. So my headphones, I made it so it talks to me when my battery is low. I forgot this captures all my audio, which includes my headphone audio. So you probably heard it was my headphones telling me it's about to die soon. Yeah. So that is a thing. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? I do hope this was helpful. I will get better at this process. So please, any hints, if you want to connect with me on Discord afterwards or message me any questions you have, feel free to do so. If you need, have any comments on the process or want to give any ways to improve, feel free to do so. Let's see. Fork, write your code, new branch, push, PR, wait for merge. Did I get it right? Pull, yes. So if you are working on the project, this is possibly one you can fork it, write your own code, create on a new branch, push it, wait for a pull request. But the only key issue is forking generates a whole new repository, so that might not be fully working. So if you're trying to merge it back into another person's project, you would just clone the project down, right? And then you would then clone it down, create a new branch, work on that branch, push it, make a pull request, wait for it to be merged. My Discord, I am just Kev from MLH on the MLH Discord. So you can just go on the MLH Discord and you should be able to find me there. Actually, that reminds me, where did my Discord go? There it is. So anyone in chat, if you go to INIT chat, I will say hi. Anyone feel free to say hi. So that is me. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can edit a fork repo without cloning it. So GitHub has been really improving their online editing ability. So if I wanted to edit, let's say this, pick an easier file. So let's say edit this port MD, right? I can just go directly edit it here and it will directly show up. No, fork is only when you want to take a project as your base and you build upon it. If you want to contribute to open source project, you can also fork it and do, so you can also do it that way, is you fork a project and you request a merge, request a pull in. It really depends. So you would use fork and not use fork depending on what type of project you're on and what permissions you have. So you would fork a project, let's say if it's open source, and you would fork it, make your changes, ask for pull requests, they might accept or not. If you're a member of that project already, so for example, I also run a hackathon, Hackathon BC. If I was working for that, I'm a member of that project, I would need to fork it. I would just clone down the project itself, create my local changes, and push it directly on. If let's say you were trying to help me with something and it's open source and you want to make a change, you would fork it, make your changes, make a pull request in. So that's just depending on where type of project you're working on. So I will drop, so my GitHub doesn't have that much going on, but here is my GitHub. If you're interested in my Discord, you can just say hi in the chat. So how to make a pull request after contributing, you would go to your GitHub, right? So let's say I will go back to here. You go to pull requests. You would do new pull requests, right? And then I would say pull to where. I would not want to do this because I haven't. Oh, sorry, you can't see my screen. That would be helpful. So to pull request, you would just go to, if you're working on an open source project, you would just go to, after you fork it, you make your changes, right? So I would go to my version of this terminal. Let's say I'm helping Microsoft out here. I would then go to pull my code. After I made changes, go to pull request, click on new pull request, and then pull it directly over here, right? But another example of this, where someone is, if you have permission already, is if we go to our repositories, go to MLH, go back, we can hit game demo. If I make a pull request here, I can make a local pull request from my main or another branch I make directly to here. If you have to work on multiple branches, I see someone made a pull request. So like here, someone made a pull request. All right, I did it. I can merge it in, and then now confirm merge. Now their pull will show up on my thing. So it's just a matter of what you're working on and how you do it. You can see my screen now, right? Because I'm pretty sure. So git fetch and git pull. See, this is great things you check the documentation for. So if you go to the reference manual, we can check this out together. So git pull is right here, git fetch is right here. You can open them up. So git pull fetches from and integrate with another repository or a local branch. Git fetch downloads object and references from another repository. So git fetch sounds like it's kind of like how you would do a fork request. You would probably just git fetch it, but you can read more about it and correct me if I'm wrong. But this says it just downloads object and references from another repository. This actually fetches from and interrogate with another repository or local branch. Okay, cool. Well, any other last minute questions before our next session start, which will covering how web development. So let me just double check. So if you don't know, we can check the schedule for what's going to be happening next. So I will actually, let's look at the schedule real quick to see what's happening next. So our next event will be Web Development Track Part 1, and it's going to be hosted by Hannah, our lovely Hannah. So feel free to stop by, utilize the tools you've learned here to start your project, to manage it, so you can share it later with everyone. But if not, if there's no any more questions, I'll give 2 more minutes, 3 more minutes for last minute questions. We'll call it a day for now. And then I'll see you guys again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for my next workshop. But yeah, make sure to join Hannah for her workshop on web development, on the web development track, part 1. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. Again, feel free to connect with me, ask me any questions. Make sure to stay for Hannah's session and connect with me on Discord. You can ask any questions there. Let me know if you have any feedback. Have a good night, everyone. Take care. Okay, I saw that last question. Yes, they will be a VOD for this. I don't know if you can hear me. I don't think my thing has loaded, but yes, they will be a VOD for this. You can check on, I think, our Twitch, and it's going to go on your YouTube. So if you want to check that for any information, go for it.